Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel and happy October. Today I'm doing a September reading wrap up. I read 24 books this month, which is really good and really awesome, but I am really sad because none of those books were a 5-star read. 2 of them came close, but I overall had a ton of disappointments and books that I've been wanting to read for a long time that just didn't live up to the hype. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Shreya. Super nice to meet you. I would love it if you could hit the like button and subscribe, and let's just get started. So I started the month off with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I'm covering up some parts because it is a library book, but first of all, look at how gorgeous this book is, and it was my September book club pick. I picked it, and you know, I have to say I was really disappointed in this book. This book is a cozy fantasy, and it's about a woman named Emily Wilde. She is a professor and she is making an encyclopedia of fairies. Cute little adventures that she gets on, and there's like a little bit of a romance subplot, and it just sounded like it was going to be a really fun cozy read, and unfortunately I just had such a hard time getting through it. It took me multiple days. I just could not like sit down and finish this book because it was just so boring. It moved at such a slow pace. This one is pretty short. It's just about 300 pages, and it took me such a long time to read, which is a sign that it's just not the book for me. But I did give it 3 stars because I think that if I spent some time and set up the mood and maybe had like the fireplace going and a candle and a cozy blanket, then it could have been moved up to 4 stars. I could have really enjoyed the mood and the ambiance, but I just couldn't get into it. Like, honestly, like if I'm being completely true to myself, I would give this book a 2 stars, but I think that it's a 3 stars. It's definitely 3 stars. I would try to read this again like next year or if I get in the mood, but unfortunately it did let me down. Next, I read The X-Hex and The Kiss Curse. So The X-Hex I read at the beginning of the month, and The Kiss Curse I just read a couple of days ago at the end of the month, and I'm happy to report that I gave both of these books 4 stars. They were so cute. They're little witchy rom-coms, and if you want a fall book, an easy read, something that's not too long, I highly recommend. I read these both on the app Hoopla, which is kind of like a Kindle app but for the library, so you don't pay anything, and I honestly want to get my hands on the physical copies and read them every single year. Like, they're just super fun rom-coms with witches and magic, and I just think it's super lighthearted and super cute, and they're definitely not YAs. Like, there is some adult content in those books, but it's like really cute, you know? So I highly recommend The X-Hex and The Kiss Curse. Not much to say other than they're just like spooky fall vibes rom-coms. Highly recommend those books. Super cute. And then I read Today, Tonight, and Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and I've actually wanted to read this book for a really long time now. Every single time I would go into a Barnes & Noble, especially when I was in college, I would almost pick it up and almost buy it because I think that the cover is super cute, but I got my hands on it in the library and I did not like this book at all. I could not get into it. It took me a long time to get through, and it was just so YA. It gave me Never Have I Ever vibes. If you love Davy and Ben Gross together in Never Have I Ever, you would probably like Today, Tonight, and Tomorrow, and that was the only redeeming factor to me as to why I gave it 2 stars and not a 1, is because that book reminded me so much of that couple dynamic on the show. It was kind of a cute and lighthearted read, but for some reason I just wasn't connecting with the characters. The writing wasn't super easy for me to digest. It just felt like I was like really having to pay attention, and it just went by super slowly. So unfortunately I did give that one 2 stars. Then I read Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score. I have been waiting for this book for so long. This is Lucian and Sloane's story in the Knock 'Em Out trilogy. I'm pretty sure this was the last book, and I had such a good time reading this. It was almost 5 stars. Almost. I did give it a 4.5, and the reason being is because if it just focused on their romance with a little bit of the subplot, it would have been a 5 stars, but this book focused too much on the subplot. There's a mystery going on, and I don't want to go too much into it because you have to read the other 2 books first, in my opinion. I love the Knock 'Em Out trilogy. I think this one is definitely my favorite. This one or the first one, because I love Lucian and Sloane. Their story was a lot different than what I thought it was going to be. Their story with T in the last two books to be kind of more of an enemies to lovers thing. Like, yes, it was still enemies to lovers, but I didn't really get the enemies sense in this book, and that's also another reason why it wasn't completely a 5-star read for me. But I just had a really good time reading this. I was giggling, kicking my feet. I really liked this book. I just think that it was too long for what it was, and that's why it wasn't 5 stars. Oh my god. Then I read the entire Shatter Me series. I have wanted to read the series for so long, and I couldn't find it from my library, and I wasn't gonna buy those books because to me it just feels like a waste of money, and I'm so glad that I didn't because the whole series honestly was mid. I gave every single book a 2 or 3 stars with the exception of Ignite Me and Restore Me. Ignite Me was a 4-star and Restore Me with a 4.7. I almost gave that one 5 stars, but I just couldn't. Like, the Shatter Me series, guys, is so mid. I did read all those books on Hoopla. If you have a local library, I highly recommend asking about Hoopla because I have been able to read so many books at no cost at all, and it has really improved my reading journey. So highly recommend checking out the app Hoopla. That's where I read all of these books. I have to say, I read it because I wanted to find out why everybody loved Aaron Warner, and I do get it. I do get it. Like, he was giving me butterflies. I was reading about Aaron Warner and I was blushing. Like, he had me blushing, and that doesn't happen to me a lot in books. So I do love Aaron Warner. I think he is one of the best characters ever to exist in something like this, but I also wasn't expecting it to be so dystopian. This book series was so dystopian, and I knew absolutely nothing going into it, and I think that's why I was so honestly like taken aback. I was like, what is this? But basically the story is about Juliet, and she starts off stuck in a prison basically, and she cannot touch people. Every single time she touches someone, horrible things happen, and she finally meets somebody that can touch her, and then the story just goes from there. It reminds me of Divergent, basically like dystopian vibes. I would say it's worth a read if you can get your hands on the books and not pay too much for them, because I don't think it's worth spending your money on them. And like, the novellas were fun and cute, but it just wasn't a life-changing book series for me, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But it also wasn't horrible, and I've always wanted to read them, so I'm glad I did, and I love Aaron Warner, and my favorite book was Restore Me. I thought it was so good. There's the original trilogy that ends with Ignite Me, and I didn't know how the rest of the series was going to pan out, but then something crazy happened at the end of Ignite Me, and I was like, oh my god, this is how it's gonna go on. So I will say the series does get better as you go on, but definitely not my favorite fantasy dystopian series at all. Then I read the first 2 novels in the Addicted series, which is Addicted to You and Ricochet. This is the 3rd book, which I'm currently reading, but it's the only physical copy that I have, which is why I'm holding it up right now. I gotta say, I knew what the Addicted series was about, but I don't think I really like comprehended what it was about. I gave both Addicted to You and Ricochet 2 stars. I didn't hate them by any means, but they weren't a 3-star or 4-star at all. They were very like mid, below mid. So basically it follows the story of Lily and Lo. Lily is addicted to sex and Lo is addicted to alcohol, and they try to help each other out. I just didn't love the way the addiction was written. I didn't love just the way these characters acted, and I heard it does get better, so I am making my way through the entirety of the Addicted and Calloway Sister series. By the end of the year, I definitely want to have read the entire thing, which is why I'm on the 3rd one right now. I'm keeping on reading with the series, even though I don't really want to, because I just need to know what the hype is about. So hopefully when I get to Calloway Sisters, it gets better, but I just didn't love it so far. The characters don't seem very mature to me, but hopefully I can read on. So I did start the Addicted Calloway Sister series, which is super popular. Haven't loved it so far. Then I read Legendborn by Tracy Dion. This cover is gorgeous. I have been wanting to read Legendborn for the longest time. I've had this sitting on my shelf for a couple of months now, and I felt like fall, this is the perfect time to make my way through it. I have to say, I was so disappointed in this, and I just feel stupid now. I gave this book 3 stars. It's honestly probably a 2.5 now that I'm thinking about it. This follows Bree, and Bree goes to UNC Chapel Hill. Her mother died, and the minute that she gets to Chapel Hill, she starts noticing weird things happening. And this is a Arthur round table night. You know what I'm talking about. I cannot comprehend words, but it's a Arthur, like King Arthur retelling, basically. It's not a retelling, but the magical characters and stuff in the book are like King Arthur related. I watched the show Merlin, so I feel like I kind of knew like what was going on with the characters, which is so stupid because I didn't know anything. It was an interesting book, and I definitely like paid attention the whole time because I feel like you have to, but I downloaded the second one on my Kindle also months ago. I downloaded it on my Kindle because I didn't want to buy the hardcover, and I have no motivation to pick up the second one at all. I don't feel like the first one ended on too big of a cliffhanger, and I'm probably just not going to pick up the second one anytime soon because I have a ton of other books that I want to get to, and if this one was really good and kept my attention, then I would be like, oh my god, let's go into the second one, but unfortunately it just didn't hold my attention, and I feel kind of sad about that, but I'm just really sad because I wanted to love it so much, and I just didn't. I feel like it was so hard to understand, and it wasn't easy to digest. Not it for me. Then I read The Maidens by the same author that wrote The Silent Patient, and I gotta say, I finished this book in a couple of hours. I was flying through this, and I gave it a 3 stars because it was really good, but it didn't have a crazy plot twist or anything crazy that happened at the end, and that's what I love The Silent Patient for, but The Maidens just didn't have that. So this book follows Mariana, and her husband died, so she's trying to solve that mystery of what happened to her husband, and then she has a niece named Zoe, and all of Zoe's friends are dying, and she feels super protective over Zoe, and so she goes back to the university that Zoe is at and that she also went to, and there's this really creepy shady professor, and they're just trying to solve the mystery, and it honestly was super good. Held my attention the whole time, but I got a 3 stars because it just could have been better. I feel like it could have been better. The Silent Patient was so good, especially with the plot twist, but this one didn't hold a candle to it, unfortunately. Okay, let's finally talk about something that I actually enjoyed so much, and that was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, I think. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong, but this is actually a memoir, and this follows Carmen. Obviously, it's the author, it's a memoir, true story, but the way she writes is so lyrical and poetical. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's just so beautiful. And she talks about her previous relationship and the abuse that she endured and what that was like and the toll that it took on her, and honestly I just really love this book. I think she wrote about her story in such an interesting and unique way, a way that I've never seen anyone write about it before. The chapters are super interesting and like super short, and they're more like excerpts instead of chapters of just different moments in time that happened to her, and I just felt so sad reading this whole thing. And there's a section towards the end that's super unique, so I highly recommend this to everybody. I gave this one I think a 4 or 4.5, but honestly, like, it's someone's story and trauma, so I don't want to rate that too harshly. Like, I don't want to give a book a rating when it's so deeply personal, but it was just an amazing book, so highly recommend In the Dream House, but check trigger warnings. Okay, then I read The Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I literally was the first person to put a hold on it from my library, and I'm so excited to read this, but it let me down. I gave this book 2 stars. I don't know what's wrong with me this month. Like, am I being super harsh, or am I dumb? Like, or is the book just not that good? I love The Naturals by her. I read that whole series last month, and I love The Inheritance Games, but this one was not good. I felt like genuinely this book was a waste of my time. It was almost 500 pages. It follows Jameson and Grayson, but the problem I had with this is that both brothers were going on their separate journeys, and I wish it was one cohesive storyline line, and it just didn't feel as epic and amazing as her other ones. I feel like her next book in this little series is going to be really good, just the way that she set it up. But I also feel like you don't need to read this one to read the next one that she's going to be coming out with. So I just feel like if you're on the fence or you have other things that are on your TBR, just hit those first, because this one honestly wasn't that good. I think it's the worst book that I've read by her, and it was really sad. It feels a little bit like a cash grab, and there were some things that were really fun about this, but it just felt like a waste of my time. I don't know what the point of the book was, so that was disappointing. We have 3 more books. I'm gonna end it on a high note, but I must talk about the biggest disappointment of the month, and I've had a lot of disappointments this month, unfortunately. I gave this book 2 stars, and I fully expected to give it 5, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang, and I just, oh my god. I don't know. I don't know. I have read every single book by this author. She is one of my favorite authors. I think that she's such a genius and so smart, and we're so lucky that we get to read her work. I recently read Yellowface, fell in love, loved the Poppy War trilogy, even though the ending made me really mad. And so I was like, I have to read Babel. This has been sitting on my shelf for months because it's just intimidating, and I finally decided to read it, and oh my god, I just didn't like it. So this one is a fantasy kind of realism book, and it follows Robin Swift, and he goes to this school called Babel in Oxford, England, and the trade is linguistics and learning different languages, and that's the power, and that's how you do magic in this society. And it points out the danger and just how colonialism works, and I just feel like it was so boring. It was so boring. I was trudging along trying to read this book. It just was so boring. And honestly, I almost DNF'd this book so many times, and then I hit the 70% mark, and it finally was getting a little bit interesting. And the thing I loved about Yellowface is the fact that it was just such an interesting novel through and through. You didn't have to care or love the messages and just the dangers of the publishing industry that she was pointing out. It was genuinely such an entertaining novel and just so good. But this wasn't even entertaining or good or any of that stuff. It was so boring, guys. Like, oh my god, it was so boring. I want to know how people love this. I do think it's a very impressive novel, just the way it reads. It's like a textbook, and I mean, just that in itself is really impressive, but I honestly cannot recommend this one. I cannot recommend it. Then I read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, and I've been wanting to read this book for a pretty long time, and I read Shark Heart and absolutely freaking loved that book, adored it. And so I was hoping that this would be kind of like that, and I gave this one a 2 stars because the only enjoyable part of that book for me was the octopus's point of view, and that was barely there. I needed more of him, and I didn't get that. And then I think that the message is really good. I can tell why people like the book, but it's just the writing was just not clicking for me. Like, I don't know what it was about this month. Like, it's been a really disappointing month, and that book just didn't click with me. Then the last book that I read, thank god, end of the month on a good note. It was almost a 5-star read. Freaking love this book. Can't recommend it enough. And that is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Oh my god. I love this book so much. I immediately got The Dead Romantics. I will be reading that in October. This book is so good. It is about Clementine, who is a publicist, and she's going through a rough time because her aunt died, so she's just like trying to get through the day, and her apartment, which was also her aunt's apartment, is magical, and sometimes it allows you to go 7 years into the future or 7 years into the past. And she slips 7 years into the past and meets a guy, and it's like romance but also literary fiction, and just the nuances in the language that Ashley Poston uses is just so beautiful. It's such a beautiful book. I laughed, cried, giggled. The guy in this book is so sweet. He has such a positive outlook on life. It didn't feel quite like a 5-star read to me. That's why I only gave it like a 4.7, but it was super close to a 5, and I devoured this book in one day. I cannot recommend it enough, and I'm excited to see if The Dead Romantics lives up to the hype. So that was it, guys. That was all the books that I read in September. Hopefully I will have a better month in October, but I will keep you guys updated. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye!